Wonderful. I think we could probably get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Andrea Morse and I'm the Interim Assistant Director for Study Abroad at the University of Wisconsin-Stout. The session is being recorded and I'm going to let the presenter, Alli Reed, go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Alli Reed. I am the Study Abroad and Off-Campus Programs Advisor at St. Norbert College. And today we're talking about reflections on faculty-led travel during a pandemic. So just to kind of outline, I will talk a little bit more about myself and my role at my institution. We're going to have a quick poll question. I'll talk about the program that I participated in during the January, some of the challenges we faced, a lot of COVID-specific ones related to logistics, testing, cases while we were traveling, and then some reflections in how that affected and changed our future programming. And then of course the Q&A at the end. So first, like I said, my name is Alli. My title is Study Abroad and Off-Campus Programs Advisor. So as you can imagine, I work directly with students, helping them find programs, promote programs, recruiting students. Some of the things I will be talking about today have more to do with like faculty-led programming and planning. That is something that my colleague primarily does. But I can mostly speak to the student planning and then my experiences participating in this program. So for those of you who don't know, St. Norbert College is a private Catholic liberal arts school in De Pere, Wisconsin. So De Pere is right next to Green Bay. So you can kind of think Green Bay, Wisconsin. Everyone knows where that is. Go Pack Go. And we have an enrollment of about 2,000 students here. And of all of our students, about 30% of graduates actually study abroad during their time at St. Norbert College. And I think this really speaks to how important international education is here at our institution. But over the January 2022 term for us, we ran 3 faculty-led programs, one in Greece, one in Italy, and then the one that I participated in was in a split between Italy and Jordan. Let's do a quick poll. Have you or your institution, organization run faculty-led study abroad programs this past January? So what I want you to do for this poll is to go to the reactions part of your Zoom panel and raise your hand if you ran a program, study abroad faculty-led program in January. I just want to get a feel for how many others ran programs. Oh, we have a couple. Okay. So I see Brianna, you have your hand up. Can you tell us a little bit about what your faculty-led program was like? Oh, and Jason too.
Jump on camera here. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Rice. I recently left my position with Viterbo University as their coordinator of study abroad, but we did run a program to the Galapagos Islands through EF College Tours, is who we worked through. Took a group of 7 students to Ecuador and then over to the Galapagos Islands. And I think it worked out really well. It was good to have a smaller group of students, and going to, remote islands was really effective as well.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think, Jason, if you want to hop on quick. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Jason Koba with Academic Programs International. So I'm based in Dallas, Texas, but I work with Wisconsin. So hello, everyone. We had a few different programs that we worked with partners for this January, but one in particular from my schools that I worked with was to Seville, Spain. It was a program that actually left in December. So it was kind of a late fall program into this January term. And so that one was really good. And it was about 12 students with a partner from Ohio. And it was really good. We did have some COVID issues, of course, some quarantine issues and things of that nature. So that was interesting when the faculty member contracted COVID and we had to worry about what was going to happen there when the students were okay, but the faculty member did get sick. So yeah, definitely some interesting challenges that continue to arise all the time. So, but it ended up being successful in the long run. So very excited about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing. You'll probably be able to relate to a lot of what I have to share today, but let's continue. So the program that I participated in, again, we had 3 of them. This is the one I ended up on. And how this happened was due to some backup planning. We decided before anything happened, what was going to be our plan if one of the faculty leads or co-leads got COVID either before or during the trip. And I was the backup plan. No matter whichever of the 3 it happened to, I had a go bag packed and ready to go on the program. But before that even happened, the program is titled Interfaith Relations in the Middle East. So it was led by a theology religious studies professor with a background in Arabic and the Middle East and Islam in particular, and then co-led by international studies / poli-sci professor who had a background obviously in politics, had done foreign service work before, and also had a background in Arabic and working in the Middle East. So there were 8 students that applied and were ready to participate in the program. And the program itinerary was to take place in 2 different locations in the Middle East, 1 week in Israel and then 1 week in Jordan, to get a comparative look at those 2 countries and how faith interacts in both of them. So what we have at St. Norbert College, we call them 2+2 programs because many of the courses at St. Norbert are worth 4 credits. So with these 2+2 programs, that students would take half of the class before they leave, so the 2 credit portion in fall 2021, and then they would take the other half while they're abroad in January 2022. So that's where the 2+2 comes in, and this is important because as we faced some challenges, we had to kind of shift and pivot how we did instruction. So all students had to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 before they left. And at that time, fully vaccinated was, 2 shots of Moderna or Pfizer or 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson. And then travel insurance with a cancellation coverage, the cancel for any reason coverage specifically, was strongly encouraged for all students. So we didn't make them do it, we didn't enroll them in it. We just strongly encouraged it and sent them lots of reminders, encouraging them to sign up for that insurance. So just to give you a little bit of timeline of how things unrolled, we had in April 2021, we opened applications for the program. We recruited, promoted it, started getting applications. We also offered this early application award. Thanks to a donor, we were able to incentivize more applications by offering an early application award of, I think, $150 towards their total program fee if they applied by April 30th. So we had a nice little rush really early on, but our official deadline was in August 2021. So that's when they had to have the application in. They had to have, we have an application fee, and then a couple weeks later, we have a commitment fee. Both, of course, go towards the total program fee. But around this time, after students had applied, committed, deposited, we realized that there needed to be a program site change. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a later slide. And then September 2021 was kind of their deadline to enroll in the travel insurance for the cancel for any reason policy. And then October 21 was when the full program fee was due. And then they departed early January of 2022. So first of our COVID challenges, we have a lot of logistical challenges that we faced as a result of COVID or directly because of COVID. So the first one I mentioned in the timeline there was the program location was switched from Israel to Rome, Italy. The reasoning for this is our risk management team, as we were working through and kind of monitoring the situation in the Middle East, Israel's change in entry requirements made us wary that students would be able to enter the country and be able to do the program as intended. Thankfully, we have a long-standing partnership with SAI in Rome. Shout out to our partners in Rome who were so helpful and were able to pivot really quickly and help us plan a week in Rome on very short notice. But it was important to us, even though we were going to be split between Europe and the Middle East, that the focus was maintained on the Middle East and interfaith relations specifically. So some ways we did that was they connected us with some refugee organizations that talked about refugee populations in Rome and how, you know, the strong Roman Catholic faith is interacting with, you know, refugees from different faiths and backgrounds, and how these organizations really impact the refugee population. We also, you know, toured the Jewish ghetto while we were in Rome. Of course, the students were really excited. As a Catholic institution, we do have a decent amount of Catholic Christian students, so I think they were not disappointed by this program change. We didn't have any students withdraw an application because of the program change. And it was really exciting for them to be able to see the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica, but also we did get to see a mosque in Rome, and it was actually really cool. They had Qurans from a whole bunch of different Middle Eastern countries, and I think it really gave a great comparative perspective to the program. Additionally, about a month, maybe 3 weeks before the program was set to start, the flight between Rome and Amman, Jordan was canceled. I think we had originally had it through Lufthansa, totally canceled their flight. And as many of you may know, flight cancellations were very common around this time. And my colleague, our director of study abroad, was searching very desperately for alternatives. And there were very limited options. Either the alternatives were going to happen really late in the program where they wouldn't get a full week in Jordan, or they'd get, you know, a couple days in Jordan, or they would totally be outside of our program dates. So our last option was to rebook with Ryanair. And for those of you that know, Ryanair is not an ideal flight for a group of students. And I prepped them for this. I said, okay, guys, we're rebooked with Ryanair. No one had flown Ryanair before, not even our faculty lead. I said, it's not going to be comfortable. They're going to upcharge you for everything. And it ended up being one of those run through the airport situations. The check-in line was super long, even though we were there 3 hours early. They only gave half of our students their boarding passes. We had to go back to the desk when students are like, hey, I didn't get a boarding pass. And I was like, well, go back. We need the boarding pass to get on. And it was a frantic, you know, situation for students. That was one of the greatest feedback we got was, don't ever book Ryanair again, but it was our only option at the time. But I tried to put a positive spin on it. I was like, you guys had this great like travel experience. You experienced the run through the airport. Everyone needs to do that once in their life, right? And then additionally, the very first day they were in Rome, one of our students got pickpocketed on the bus in Rome. So her wallet was stolen from her purse. Obviously, she didn't feel it at all, which is something we tried to warn them about, but it happens, you know. And her CDC, like proof of vaccination, was in her wallet. So thankfully, before the program, we had students upload copies of their CDC vaccine cards. So we had a copy on file, as well as having a digital version of that card, just in case something like this were to happen. There was also a mountain of paperwork that was required for traveling across borders. Andrea is going to link Google shared folder in the chat right now, where I have some resources I'll reference later. One of them is a checklist of everything students needed to do and all the documents they needed to have in order to first cross borders from the US to Rome, and then again from Italy to Jordan. And these are just an example of some of the things we had to have: proof of vaccination, of course, the negative COVID test. Each time we crossed a border, negative COVID test. A lot of European countries have that passenger locator form that helps with contact tracing. So they had to fill out 2 different ones to go to the 2 different countries. And then again, coming back to the US has their own type of form called an attestation form. So just keeping track of all the forms and making sure everyone had them. And of course, when you're checking into airlines and things, they want you to have a physical copy, and then they also ask you to upload it. But sometimes even if you upload it, you still have to show the physical copy. So that was a part-time job in and of itself, is all that extra paperwork that comes with traveling on top of COVID-related paperwork. And then masking requirements abroad were much different than they are here in Green Bay. Obviously, we prepared students for that. You know, masking is very much the norm everywhere else. You have to wear them in airports and on flights. In Rome specifically, they had to wear the equivalent of a N95. They call it something different there, in public transportation and museums. So that was very much the norm there. And thankfully, our partners at SAI gave students one free N95 mask that they could use for the duration of their time there. And then, yeah, and it was the same in Jordan, maybe not as strict on the specific type of mask, but just as we expected, masking everywhere, even outdoors, was very much the norm during our program. Additional challenges was testing during COVID. So you'll see here's a screen grab. It's from that shared folder that Andrea shared in the chat. We have a sample form of our emergency contact sheet. And I think towards the bottom of that sheet is something similar like this. That template is from our Art in Rome program. This one's specific to our Italy-Jordan program. So this is what we told students to expect for testing before and during the program. So they were supposed to get a COVID test before they left. That was their responsibility, but all on-site testing was taken care of, paid for by St. Norbert College and facilitated through our partners SAI in Italy and then SIT in Jordan. So they needed one before they get there. They needed a test before leaving Italy. They needed a test so that before leaving Italy into Jordan, but then Jordan wanted you to get tested in the airport too. And then you had to get a negative test within 72 hours after arriving in Jordan. And then they had to get a test before they left for the United States. So at minimum, students needed 5 tests throughout this 2-week program. So pre-departure testing, that was an issue for a lot of people. You know, it was around the holidays, New Year, a lot of people are getting tested. It's the height of Omicron. So we're advising, you know, get your test, your COVID schedule as soon as possible. You know, here are some resources, obviously your Walgreens, your CVS, and then some of the healthcare providers here in the area. A lot of students, not just on my program, but on our other programs, had delayed testing results. They didn't get it in time. We had people that had to get tested at the airport in Chicago. And we found that some who did get tested in the airport in Chicago were found to be positive. I'll talk about that in the next slide. So pre-departure testing was a mess. In-country testing was a little bit better because we had assistance from our in-country partners, SAI and SIT. They, you know, coordinated the testing with labs there and really helped facilitate that, which was really nice. We didn't have to, you know, look around for a testing site and make sure we got it on time. We had planned and had organized with our partners to pay with a credit card, but oftentimes the labs would give us different information once we were there in person and say we need cash. And sometimes it was a lot of cash in a very short amount of time, but our partners really helped facilitate that when it was like, oh crap, we don't have 200 euro per person for this test, like, can you help us out? So thank goodness for our partners again, but that was the reality that we weren't expecting in country. And then I'll talk about this more, but everyone had at least 5 tests, but there were some people who had to get tested more because they tested positive, and we will get into that next. So we had some positive cases. No surprise, some of you said that you did as well. So first, one of our 8 students tested positive before departure. So that student did not even come down to the group flight in Chicago. Thankfully, they had bought the travel insurance with the cancellation coverage. So they filed their claim. And then alternative coursework was organized for the student because, as I mentioned before, the student had already taken half of the class. Of course, they want to take the second half of the class so they can get full credit. So alternative coursework was organized for that student. And then our faculty co-lead tested positive before departure as well. They were on their way to Chicago. They were one of the people who did not get their test result in time. Their backup plan, get tested at the airport in Chicago. The test at the airport said they were positive. And because I had anticipated knowing before the day of departure whether or not I would be leaving on everyone else's departure date, and it was really too late to get me on the flight, so we had to reorganize my flight, and therefore I had to get another test because it would have been, my previous test would have been not enough to leave the next day. And then we did get a positive COVID test during the program with one of our students. The poor thing, the day after. So like I said, you had to get tested before getting into Jordan, and then Jordan wanted you, even though you show a negative test to enter the country, you have to get tested in their airport again. So the next morning we came in really late during the night to Jordan. The following morning we all got our test results, and the students sent me a message on WhatsApp with a screenshot of their positive test results, and was like, what do I do? I said, don't leave your room, put your mask on. We will work with our partners to figure out like what the quarantine requirements are here and what we should do. Like I said, she needed additional testing, and so did I, because we had to move her departure date due to the quarantine period, and then my departure date was moved as well so that I could travel back with the student. And there she is in a Jordanian health clinic getting checked out by a doctor because, as you know, PCR tests are what was used in Jordan. It's the only kind of test they have available. And she kept testing positive throughout the entire week. So we tested her several times. We tested her right away after the first positive test to see if it was a false positive. That's what we were hoping for. It was not. So the student spent the whole week in Jordan, quarantined in the hotel room. Then for this student too, we had to come up with alternative forms of instruction. So seeing if we could Zoom record or add the student to a Zoom meeting when we were meeting with various organizations in Jordan. Recording on-site tours. I was sitting there on WhatsApp recording tours that we were having of like the Jordan River and things like that. And then symptom monitoring. I guess thankfully she did not have very many symptoms at all. In fact, she told me she felt fine, which often sucks more because if you don't feel sick, you have to be treated like you are. I know that's very frustrating. And then, like I said, setting up the alternative return date. Luckily for her, they shortened, I'll talk about this in the next slide too, but they shortened the quarantine period while she was quarantining from 10 days to 7 days. And because we had to change her flight date, she was cleared 2 days before the new flight date. So we did like a rushed Jordan experience in 2 days of trying to recreate the most impactful days that the rest of the group got. So she did get to see Jordan and did get to have at least somewhat of that experience that all the other students had. But it was our biggest challenge throughout the entire program. So what did we learn from this all? First and foremost, that running multi-country programs, is logistically difficult normal times, but especially during the pandemic, it was a lot of work. It was definitely a full-time job. There were days I felt like I was working 24 hours nonstop. So in planning for our summer 2022 programming, we originally had proposed a couple of multi-country programs. One was like economics in the EU. They were going to go to 4 different countries in Europe. There was another one that was going to do 3 different countries in Europe. Again, these programs had been run before successfully, pre-pandemic. But based on how our January term went, we decided that 2 was the maximum that we could handle, especially not knowing how the rest of the pandemic or post-pandemic would unfold. So we changed up some of our programming. The cancellation coverage for travel insurance is a must while we are still waiting on some of those claims to be processed. It was a really good way to protect students financially from their investment in the program when we couldn't, or our partners couldn't recover any costs that the travel insurance could. And I don't have to tell you all this, but guidelines are constantly changing. Like I mentioned, even when we were in country, things changed from, our pre-departure orientation. Like I said, the one student that was on my group, her quarantine period went from 10 days to 7 days. And thankfully we found out on the 7th day. So then she just had to get cleared by a doctor so she could come home. And that positive cases, we do think that the booster made a difference. Again, I'm not a medical professional, but anecdotally, based on our experiences from January, it did seem that they made a difference, because the student in my group that tested positive, and there was a student in another group that tested positive as well, and neither of them had their COVID booster, even though we recommended it. So that probably made a difference in our experience. But despite all of the chaos and the challenges, our students really had a great time and they learned a lot. Even the one that had to quarantine had such a positive attitude and outlook after our rushed 2-day tour of Jordan. So it was still worth it, even though at times it felt like it was never going to end with the constant challenges and new obstacles that we faced during the program. So here are some of the resources. They are shared in the chat, and I will include this presentation in that shared Google folder so you can easily reference it as well afterwards. But are there any questions for me at this time? I also have my email there if you want to reach out later.
Thank you, Alli. My goodness, you had just about every situation thrown at you, and impressive how you really navigated all the different pivots that you had to do. So kudos. I wanted to just apologize to people about not letting you in sooner to the session. I thought I would hear some sort of noise or something about letting you in. So I apologize for those who had to arrive late, and we can certainly, if anyone needs a little brief recap of the first few minutes, please let us know. There was a question regarding laptops. The question is, did you require students to travel with laptops so they could join via Zoom while in quarantine if needed?
We did not require them to, unless the faculty told students before they left that they should bring a laptop. But everyone brought laptops so that they could complete their coursework while they were there. So, and I probably should have mentioned this, the student who tested positive, I checked in with her every single night via Zoom to see how everything was going, to give her updates on her quarantine status, testing status, what her next steps were in regards to quarantine. But every single student we traveled with did have a laptop anyway. We didn't require it from study abroad. Maybe the faculty did. I'm not sure. Sorry.
There's a couple of comments here. Just it's so nice that you were able to still give her an experience in the 2 days she had left in Jordan. That is fantastic. You're able to do that. Someone mentioned that quarantine times were also shorter for students that had the booster.
Yes, that's true. I don't know if that was the case in Jordan, but the one student in our Art in Rome program who tested positive, I think the quarantine period was 10 days if you were not boosted, but only 5 or 7 if you were boosted. So that was met with some frustration on the students' part, but of course we did recommend that they get their booster before they left if they were eligible. So that is true. Yes, thank you.
Great.
And big shout out to SIT for helping the student have a good 2 days in Jordan. They really helped facilitate that because I was a little overwhelmed. The program is over. Am I going to have to coordinate all these activities with the student? But they hooked us up with transportation and everything. So again, thanks to our partners, SAI and SIT. Very
nice. Another question is, did anyone stay back with the student during the day?
No. No one stayed back with the student during the day. I mean, the student had to quarantine in the hotel room. So even if someone had stayed back, I don't know how helpful they would have been, but the hotel did a really good job of bringing food to the student and asking her if she needed. They were very accommodating, more than they probably had to be. And we did bring, you know, fun little treats and snacks back to her a couple times during the week. And we even took, well, we did have this interesting thing where she had taken out a bunch of JD, the Jordanian dinars, before or once she got to the airport. So we all knew the student had some money and wanted to buy souvenirs, and we weren't sure she would be able to. So at one point during the week, they set up a thing where they put a baggie outside the door. The student put the cash in, and then they sprayed it down and disinfected it in the bag. And then we would take pictures of things that she might want and bought some souvenirs for her. I mean, obviously we ended up being able to go shopping, but at the time we didn't know. So we did everything we could to kind of keep her included. I encouraged other students to, you know, reach out to her and with funny jokes, or not necessarily pictures of what was going on to make her feel left out, but, you know, inside jokes to make her feel included. I even was texting her a couple times a day and sending her pictures of things I knew she would find funny. So the students actually had a really nice group connection. They all got together really well, despite being, you know, from different backgrounds, different majors. So it was really a good environment for her to be in, such an accepting group that really cared about her and really wanted to keep in touch with her, even though she wasn't with us all the time.
Great, thank you, Alli. And Gail, you have your hand up. If you feel free to go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks. Yeah, Alli, you're speaking to this now, but I think part of our experience too was one of the things that we had planned for, but maybe didn't understand how important it was really caring for the students' mental health when they were in quarantine, particularly because the cases that we had across the board in January, they were all non-symptomatic. So students had to be quarantined without symptoms, literally couldn't leave rooms for, as Alli said on our other program, a pretty long period of time. So Alli, can you speak a bit more to how we thought about mental health in that way, and also any communication that we did with the families?
Yes, definitely. So we definitely reached out. That was actually a way that Gail helped me while I was in country, was reaching out to the parents and the families of all the students who tested positive. There was even a student, because all of our students were paired up, the roommate of the positive student had to quarantine a couple of days until she was cleared, even though her test came back negative, and her roommates came back positive. So just checking in with those students every day was really important, communicating with the families, especially clearly communicating the next steps to the families, because their child is in a new country. They don't know the quarantine requirements or the COVID procedures there, and just being very clear about what was going to happen next. And then also the mental health component was very important too. Checking in with them daily was very important. One of the students' families expressed that the student had a previous quarantine that they did not deal with very well. So then it was very important to us to make sure that this time was a lot better. And those activities, like having students reach out, for the student on the other program, we had even planned, you know, we had other students in Rome at the time who were doing their semester abroad and trying to plan a meetup once she was out of quarantine. Really doing everything we can to make them feel like they weren't alone and that they were supported and that we heard their concerns, and their discontent was very important as well.
Great, thank you, Alli. That's great. There aren't any other questions in the chat box. Has anyone else thought of any questions? Perhaps I didn't write them in the chat box. Someone mentioned here, thank you for sharing all you learned during your program. It sounds like you were able to make sure your students were safe and had a meaningful experience. Absolutely. It's great you're able to provide so much support to them. Let's see, question is there anything you do differently going forward with faculty-led programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the things we outlined, I think having those on-site partners was so crucial. I don't know if Gail, I'm sorry, I'm going to call on Gail since she does faculty-led mostly. If there's anything Gail would like to add.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. So I'm Gail Cornelius. I'm our Director of Study Abroad and Off-Campus Programs at St. Norbert. So work with Alli to help facilitate these programs. I do think, and as Alli mentioned, previously at St. Norbert, we did a lot of our own kind of bespoke faculty-led programs where we would do a lot of it kind of on our own or have faculty make logistical arrangements and those pieces. And we have found through this that definitely the on-site partner is critical. So we won't run faculty-led programs without having an on-site partner in any of our locations. We also, as Alli mentioned, at least for the short term, we used to do a lot of programming where they would go to 3 or 4 different countries. So we have changed that so that we're doing a maximum of 2 countries over the summer term. And I think that will probably extend through next January for our programming as well. The other thing that we changed, which we did change for this too, is we, like many institutions, we really had the mindset that, you know, students are adults, they're responsible for their program. We communicate with them and expect them to communicate with their families. But we have found through this, and particularly with this kind of cohort of students, that family involvement is more critical than ever. And particularly when you're talking about health and safety, having the family on board is absolutely crucial. So we do parent orientations for all of our travelers to talk through what the plans are for quarantine and testing and all of those things, so that it's not just the students that are aware of that, but the families that are aware of that. And the other thing that we did that Alli kind of mentioned, but I think is super important, is that we actually built in funding for testing during the program. We were fortunate to be able to do that through donor funds for the January programs, because it would have increased the cost of the program tremendously to the students. It was almost $400 to do all of the testing per student, to do all of the testing on the program that Alli went on. And so adding that amount to students' budget is pretty extensive. So we have worked with our advancement office here to set aside some funds to add in for those additional expenses, and are also building some of that into the budgets for our faculty-led programs going forward as well. Oh, and we have insurance for quarantine. We have a quarantine benefit attached to our insurance. So all of those quarantine expenses are already covered through our regular college's health insurance plan.
Great, thank you, Gail. For parent orientation, Gail, you mentioned parent orientation. It's something that we did several years ago, and we kind of got away from that a little bit, but we are going to be diving back into that this summer. And I don't know how many other schools do parent orientations, but is that something you'd be willing to share out? Any resources you might have on that?
Sure, we're happy. We could add that right to that shared folder that Alli set up. And that one was a very high level overview and then a lot of discussion with parents. So that's how we facilitated that. And we also did that on Zoom, of course, so parents could join from everywhere. So yeah, we'll add that presentation into the folder.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank Alli and Gail also for presenting today. This has been a fantastic session. Thank you for all this information. It's been very helpful. And we'd like to thank everyone for attending the session. And just a reminder to, if you're able to join the rest of the other sessions we have today, and there's also the raffle at 4 p.m. today, and also to complete the conference feedback form that you'll receive after the conference. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.